Okay, so we're in patch 1.2, guys. It is the promo quest Distant Lands. You had like a small amount of like mild UI changes, some stuff that improves the voiceover a little bit. Like we have new voice effects for all of the Scions when they enter the playmat, which is pretty cool. We have some like mild client fixes and bug fixes. Voiceover lines no longer play their voiceover when drawn by effects, which I think is super cool. We also have some other cool things with Dawnwalker and Stormcaller, just minor bug fixes. Just a lot of small little stuff. It looks like they're prepping up for another patch, which we found out by accident through the patch notes will be nerfing Rapid Shot down to 2 cost. So that'll be interesting to discuss, but for the moment, the main thing to discuss in this current patch is the localization, of course, where French, Italian, German, Spanish, Portuguese, Chinese, Greek, and Turkish language versions of the cards are now available, so we can change those over. However, it appears that whoever is doing the localization for Direwolf does not have quite the same quality standards, so we'll see if those get improved, but from what I've heard, they haven't been super impressive. The one that I thought that was, yeah, there's been a couple of like weird mistranslations and some, you know, like weird misgendering, other various like issues with the translation. I'm guessing that will improve over time, especially as people submit their feedback and that kind of stuff happens. But it's good to have alternate languages, so I'm pretty cool with that. But the main thing, of course, is that we now have a finished set of all of the alternate color promos, which is to say that Oathbreaker and Alpine Tracker are here. So first off, we have Oathbreaker, the 4/4 lifesteal. When it attacks, your units with lifesteal get +1/+1. This is our Argenport card, and it's a very, very Argenport card indeed. Lifesteal is definitely an Argenport type ability, and that attacking +1/+1 bonus is very similar to Paladin Oathbook. I think the parallels are really well drawn, although it's pretty funny that Oathbreaker can in fact benefit from Paladin Oathbook while giving everyone else +1/+1, or actually giving herself +1/+1. I think this card is surprisingly good. Like, it seems underwhelming, but what you actually have here is what is typically a 5/5 unit with lifesteal that just slowly snowballs out of control. It's in 2 colors. I really like 2-color units that are like fairly cheap and have a decent amount of health, because they're actually way harder to kill than they seem. This card is kind of like a mini Infernal Tyrant in terms of what kind of health it can get back. And that ability to give other units with lifesteal +1/+1 is clearly designed to encourage the use of a couple of cards that do not currently see play in Eternal and haven't seen play for quite some time, namely Vampire Bat and the 2-drop that everyone ignores, Cabal Cutthroat. Poor guy. I think he's actually going to see some play now. There should be some cool Argenport decks using him. So yeah, that's pretty exciting, and I think that there's going to be some fun Argenport decks coming out with this card. I think that overall the card is neither especially good nor especially bad, but does pretty well in the right types of decks, and should be a decent playdown on 5. So yeah, could be really, really interesting. Alpine Tracker, on the other hand, is a little bit harder to evaluate. I think Alpine Tracker is actually just kind of fascinating. So 4 cost, red, blue. This is our Skycrag card, even though he is not one of the Skycrag mages. He's more of a, or maybe it's the Praxis mages? Is the Praxis that are the mages and the Skycrag are like just the clans, Island's clan? I think that might actually be how that works. It's easy to get that mistaken because Skycrag is also like a source of a lot of spells. Like there's definitely spell focus here. But Alpine Tracker is sort of exploring a different aspect of that lore. So he is a 3/3 with charge and summon, deal 1 damage to each other unit and each player. There's some cool things going on with this, of course. Like, obviously he has an insane amount of synergy with a lot of cards that we haven't seen yet, I would say. Like, it's definitely pretty cool to give him lifesteal in any fashion, to like bring him back from the void and do crazy things like that. The thing that I think is really interesting about him is that he is a card that you can play on 6 in addition to a Lightning Storm to basically just charge through a board, dealing 3 damage to everything, and like really just kind of mess up a Praxis Tokens type deck. I think this card is very, very good at the anti-tokens stuff. You do have that issue, of course, of Xenon Obelisk, but overall his stats are not terrible. Twisted Light says that Tracker stats are horrendously bad, but no. A 3/3 charge for 4 is just fine, and when he is getting rid of all of those chumpy little blockers, I actually think that you might find this card fairly reasonable. He's not amazing, but I think there are actually some interesting places to play him. The decks I'm most excited about using him in are unstable form decks, because he's a cool summon effect with a relatively low set of stats for 4. Like, I think that in general this card actually does do a pretty decent amount of tempo play, and there's going to be some cool ways that he can be used and abused. Overall, Alpine Tracker definitely enforces a really interesting style of play that we haven't seen a lot of yet, which is going to be kind of spell-focused damage with a couple of attackers and blockers. This card pairs really well with cards like Sensari Brigand and other cards that can be kind of bogged down by chump blockers and like little 1/1s. If you are having issues with tokens in your sort of try to get there deck, I think Alpine Tracker is actually kind of interesting at doing that kind of job. So yeah, he'll be interesting. He doesn't play well with Grenadin or other token type strategies, but there are some pretty cool cards in red that have more than 1 health that are fairly aggressive and fun, and playing decks like Fevered Scout or basically anything in red and blue that has like 2 health or 3 health, there are quite a few cards that have like a little bit of a trick to them. So I'm kind of interested to see how that card plays out. In particular, though, I think he's just like a really interesting add-in if you want to have yet more ways to clear tokens. Like 4 Lightning Storm is not enough to clear out tokens. So if you're running 4 Lightning Storm and you're also running a couple of these Skycrag guys, then not only do you have more ways to clear out the tokens, but you also have ways to clear out the tokens after the Xenon Obelisk has hit 8. And that's going to be something that's actually relatively important. So yeah, just being able to increase your overall like massive amount of damage is kind of important. And I would say that this card is a little bit flexible, which is really good. Like, it's not that he's flexible so much as that he does a lot of different things. The main one is that he in fact does deal damage to each player, 1 damage to each player, and a card that can sometimes secure lethal can actually be surprisingly good. I think there are also, you know, there's the drawback as well. You might not be able to play him if you are at 1 health, but for the most part, I think that the ability to just sort of like secure a surprise point of damage is not that bad at all, and that's something that you really have to consider when you're considering this card, is that he does do that 1 extra point. That's a really minor consideration, but it does add to his overall stat value in a really interesting way. The way that he kills off little tokens, the way that he deals damage to other players, which if you're playing a sort of aggressive deck, yeah, I think there are some cool things that Tracker can do. I think this card might be a bit of a sleeper. We'll see if he runs into any decks. It seems like people don't really like him very much at the moment, but I'm interested to see how he plays out, and I think there's going to be some fun decks to test with him. So we're probably going to get to that right now.